Welcome back to the John Richard Variety Hour Show. If you're just tuning in, we have the world-renowned crime-solving duo in the studio with us, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Before the commercial, Mr. Holmes introduced us to a case involving a blue carbuncle. I'll let you and Dr. Watson take it away. But first, what exactly is a carbuncle? Well, it's elementary, my dear John. A carbuncle is a cut gemstone. In this particular case, the gem belonged to the Countess of Morcar. It was said to have been stolen from the Countess's jewel case in her room at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. I'd read about it in the paper, and at the time one John Horner, a plumber, had been apprehended and brought up on charges of taking the thing. My help in solving the case was never sought, as there was strong evidence in the form of a statement made by an attendant at the hotel, James Ryder, that the plumber was in fact the culprit. It seemed very plausible that Horner was the thief, as he was in the Countess's room to do some work on a grate not long before Ryder sounded the alarm after the Countess discovered her jewel to be missing. It seems like a very cut-and-dry case. I take it Horner admitted to his wrongdoing, and he was whisked away to prison. Quite the contrary. The stone was not found on his person. In fact, the stone had not been found at all until the wife of Mr. Peterson, the commissioner, discovered it in a goose that he had recovered after a man had dropped it. You see, Peterson was walking home when he came across a scuffle in the streets between a man walking around carrying a goose and a few roughs. The man, in defending himself, raised his stick to strike back, but upon doing so he shattered a store window. Our police official friend rushed forward to help the man, but at the sight of a man in uniform, dropped his goose and ran, as did the assailants. The only thing left of the whole ordeal were the man's hat, which was knocked off, shattered glass from the store window, and the man's goose. The same goose in which the blue carbuncle was found in its crop. Mr. Holmes, this seems to be the stuff mystery stories are made of. Dr. Watson, were you involved in this case at all? Why, yes, indeed. I went to visit my good friend during the Christmas time. At his house, I came upon him examining a hat. Holmes filled me in to the event that Commissioner Peterson witnessed. He was examining the very same hat that was knocked off the man. The man, Holmes had deduced, was Henry Baker. The initials H.B. was scrawled inside the hat, and a card on the goose that Peterson had found read, "For Mrs. Henry Baker." After describing the characteristics of the man who had lost his hat, simply by examining the characteristics of the hat, Peterson himself burst through the door. Yes, our dear old commissioner was dazed, to say the least. He had come to my home to show me what his wife had found in the goose's crop. Ah, the blue carbuncle that was stolen from the Countess. That very same one. The deduction made after the examination of the hat and the man, and more importantly, his goose, made this whole matter all the more interesting. At first, it had seemed we had found ourselves in a simple case of property lost and property found. But oh, what a property it was! My first objective was to find the Henry Baker. So, this John Horner fellow was actually innocent? And it was Henry Baker all along? Well, not quite. I presumed Baker was innocent, or at the least ignorant to the fact that the gem was in his possession, as a man who knew how valuable the bird was would not simply have left it behind. At this point, it seemed there was more to this case than what the police had discovered, especially since their discoveries did not include the stolen gem inside a Christmas bird. Oh, Sherlock, you're so witty and clever, I love you. Please, continue. So, we placed an advertisement in the paper stating we had found a goose and a hat, where it was found, and that Henry Baker could have it back by visiting my home address at a certain time. So did this man show up to your house to retrieve his belongings? Indeed he did. I'd counted on it. I deduced from my initial inspection of Mr. Baker's hat that he was a man whose finances were in such a state that the items which he had parted with would be most dear to him, and like clockwork, we found our man, or rather, our man found us. In short, after concluding he was in fact ignorant to the existence of the stone and the bird, the hat and a replacement goose were given to the man, and he left. But not before we gathered some information. Yes, the next logical thing to do, after finding the man who was lost in possession of the gem, besides the commissioner, was to find where the bird came from, for it was apparent that the gem had found its way into the bird by means other than those involving Baker. Ah, ha, ha! So you're saying that the bird was the thief, and this wild goose chase is now over? No, no, not at all, you crass little man. We had merely discovered another clue. Watson and I were now privy to where Baker bought his bonny bird, a Windigate of the Alpha Inn, as I recall. We postponed our dinner and eagerly prepared to be on our way. Once we arrived, we were told by the landlord that he had bought the birds from another seller, and so after toasting the gentleman with our beers, we were on the trail once again. Walton and I walked to the market to which we were directed, and found our goose salesman, a fellow by the name of Breckenridge. Breckenridge! That man was almost as bad as an American. Not a very bright fellow, and so quick to anger. Indeed, we had come upon the shopkeep, who had apparently sold out of geese. I proceeded to inquire as to where he purchased his birds. He did not take very kindly to my question, and went on a bit about how selling the geese that he bought was his business, and that people should not pester him about matters of where they come from or who they go to. Ah, like the common pot peddler who's reluctant to share his source in order to retain his customers. Fair analogy. Reluctance would describe very well the attitude which he exhibited regarding the matter. In order to get what we needed, I simply made a wager, which seemed to tickle his vanity. In order to prove me wrong about where the birds were bred, he had his books brought out, and had me read the address and name of his town supplier. He was in fact right. Town-bred birds. I paid him his earned coin. The laugh was well worth the price. Ah, you have such a keen eye for judging a man, Holmes. Hardly believe you could read into his mustache newspaper. A man who couldn't pass up a wager. Too bad your amusements were interrupted by the bro back at Breckenridge's stand. Well, quite a fortunate interruption it was, my friend. It just so happened that we would not be visiting Breckenridge's supply after all. We made our way back towards what appeared to be a quarrel between the salesman and a rather lowly-looking man. Upon hearing the stranger whine about a goose that belonged to him, Watson and I approached him. We were greeted with the "Who are you?" and "What do you want?" I told him I knew of his business, his search for the goose. He nearly collapsed on me with an air of unreserved gratitude. We hailed a carriage to take us back to my Baker Street residence so that we could talk in private and out of the cold. Upon my asking, he initially gave us the name of John Robinson. I asked again for his real name, and expectedly we received James Ryder. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The attendant from the hotel, right? The very same one. We had entered my living room, taking seats around the fire, after the silent cab ride back. I asked him if he wanted to know about the goose in question, and told him I had seen it, that it had in fact been here, and that there was something rather queer about this bird. I recounted witnessing a blue egg the bird laid, and that it was in my possession. Oh, I saw the walls of his soul crumbling at the weight of this account. I saw the shame, the regret, and sheer embarrassment this man was experiencing as he stood up and stumbled toward my mantelpiece. And he saw his perverted prize gleaming between my fingertips as I removed it from the strong-box. It was over. Walton helped the man, or ghost of a man, sit back down. A splash of brandy colored his face, and he spilled his story. He explained how he was made aware of the stone, and by whom, and I proceeded with my explanation of how he raised the alarm, and had the plumber sought for on suspicion of committing the crime, at which point he did something I was not expecting, but also not at all too surprising. He crawled on the floor and grasped at my legs, begging me not to bring him to court, promising that he would never do wrong again. I still was not satisfied. I asked him to explain how the stone got into the goose and into the market. A rather humorous series of events occurred, well, perhaps not for Ryder. He went on about visiting his sister after Horner had been arrested. She fattened geese, and had promised him a pick of her geese as a Christmas present. He had picked a seemingly unique one, and forced the stone down his throat, only to realize that there were in fact 2 geese which were seemingly identical. Of course, he didn't realize this until he was given his goose a while later, and cut it open in hopes of revealing his prize. Having confessed his crime and conveying sincere regret, I was left to ponder for a moment the next course of action. And what did you decide to do, Mr. Holmes? Very bluntly, I told him to get out. I knew that Ryder would flee and would not testify in court, consequently leading to the collapse of any case against Horner. Forgiveness was thick in the air during the season, and I feel the case was duly concluded. Ah, Sherlock, what a Christmas to remember. Well, that just about wraps it up for the John Richard Variety Hour show. We do have time for one caller. Hello? Hello? Sherlock, you never got back to me about the carbuncle. This is the Countess of Morcar. I would very much like it back, as it is rightfully mine. Ha! What a crazy old bird. You did return the carbuncle, right, Sherlock? Well, we all have to eat, and for a minute there it looked like Horner's goose was cooked. Thank you very much, Sherlock and Watson, for dropping by and chatting. Have a Merry Christmas, and a Merry Christmas to all you listeners out there. Tune in next time to the John Richard Variety Hour show when we'll have Big Ben in the studio to talk about time, his duty as a large clock, and the troubles in his family life for being away at work at all hours of the day and evening. Thank you.